Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. Thank you again for coming. It's been a really long but exciting day, and we've covered a lot of ground. We hope that today has been informative and educational, and that through today's conversation, a new curiosity, passion, connection, or aha moment has developed, one that we hope you take with you and continue to cultivate over the coming months and years. So this is the first ever conference of this kind we've held at Yale, and Billy and I would love your feedback, so come find us, email us. We really look forward to hearing your ideas about how to make this better. And after this panel, we'd love to invite you to our closing reception on the first floor where we had breakfast this morning. So if you go up the stairs, it's right across the way. And this is going to be a great opportunity to meet with other students, professionals, and our speakers, and to really let the day just sink in.
So we want to welcome our final panel of the day. Now that you've engaged in a day of education and conversation, you may be wondering how to translate this into a career. As such, we've brought together a group of individuals who've been through this similar transition, seasoned industry professionals, individuals that jumped right into the industry out of their education, a variety of casts and characters. And to moderate that discussion, we're going to have Kyle Jensen of Yale SOM. On our panel, we also have Tahira Rehmatullah of Hypur Ventures, Ebele Ifedigbo of the Hood Incubator, Gia Morón of Women Grow, Eneman of the Flower Shop, and Natalie Ginsberg of MAPS. So Kyle will be moderating the panel discussion today, and Kyle is the Associate Dean and Director of Entrepreneurship here at the Yale School of Management and has been our faculty advisor for this conference. Kyle is an entrepreneur, developer, and scientist. Before joining the Yale SOM faculty, he co-founded Agravida, a venture-backed biotech company based in Boston. PriorSmart, a patent analytics provider acquired by RPX, NASDAQ RPXC, and PitRow, a leader in motorsport analytics. In addition to teaching, Kyle works with numerous Yale startups as Associate Dean and Director of Entrepreneurship. I've taken one of his classes and really enjoyed it thoroughly. His research interests include entrepreneurship, intellectual property, and innovation. So please join me in welcoming Kyle and our esteemed panel.
Thank you, Barry. Excellent. Thank you all for having me here today. I have the best job of the whole conference. I get to entertain my own curiosity by asking our wonderful panelists questions. And then my intention is to provide you the same opportunity to ask questions of them. And these panelists are fantastic, luminaries in the industry. And I'm hoping that you provide us a great deal of wisdom today about how we can be involved in the cannabis industry. And maybe to begin, I thought perhaps it would be useful for us to hear from you in your own words what you do. What are you responsible for? For whom do you work? These kinds of things.
Start with me?
Yep, cool. Sure.
All right. So my name is Tahira Rehmatullah. I'm with Hypur Ventures, which is a venture capital fund that only focuses on the cannabis industry. We have 9 investments that are primarily ancillary businesses, but we also do have a cannabis cultivation facility that we're invested in Colorado. So I primarily work with our portfolio companies. I step in when they need help. I give them a lot of strategic advice, kind of put out fires with them on a regular basis and really work in partnership with them. In addition to that, I also work with a company called MTech, which is, I'm the CFO of that company. It's actually a publicly listed company on the NASDAQ. We went live January 30th, and it's a SPAC, which is a special purpose acquisition company. It's the first in the US, and with the primary focus of taking a cannabis ancillary business public. So we get 18 months, we've raised $50 million, and we're looking for a company to acquire that then would essentially assume the shell on NASDAQ. So yeah, and then in addition to that, I work with a lot of brands in the space as an advisor.
Tahira, where do you live?
New York.
You do?
I mean, I live in New York, but how much am I there is, my things are there.
And the SPAC is separate from Hypur?
Yes. So there are 3 of us from Hypur who are doing the SPAC, and because it's a publicly traded entity, you kind of have to put up walls with other things that you're doing. So. Yep.
Okay. And how long have you been at Hypur now, you said?
Hypur, I've been there since June of last year. Okay. And then MTech is actually fairly new. We filed in December, went public January 30th.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
appreciate it. Gia?
Hi, so I'm Gia Morón. I'm the EVP of Women Grow, and I work closely with our CEO in building out our markets, creating programming, focusing on diversity and inclusion, and a number of other things as we continue to build out the company. In addition to that, I also have my own PR, brand, and business development firm called GVM Communications, which is what led me into the cannabis industry. Prior to expanding my firm's coverage in the cannabis industry, I was focused on small to middle-sized businesses, working with entrepreneurs, authors, and a little bit of celebrity clients, but not so much. My primary focus is more on the corporate side or the business side. And so in 2015, I decided to jump full in. I had been standing on the sidelines watching the cannabis industry and realized, oh, this is where I want to be. I like it. See some opportunities.
Gia, how does Women Grow work with your clients? What do you do for them?
So it's so interesting, right? So I initially started with Women Grow being their PR person, and then segued into Director of Communications. I saw that there were some disconnection between internal and external communication, and have been working on that for the last year, and making sure that we are streamlining the messaging on the overall company, and also clearing up any misconceptions about what it is. So it's a for-profit company versus a nonprofit, where I know that there are a number of confusions out there.
And what do you do with your clients? I mean, what do you do for them?
So for my clients with GVM Communications.
What does Women Grow do?
Got it. For its clients. So Women Grow is the largest professional networking organization in the cannabis industry, which means that we hold signature meetings once a month, whereas a number of professionals in the cannabis space come together for networking opportunities. We hold panel discussions where experts within different sectors address various topics, from legal to accounting to how to open up a dispensary to applications. And it's a great way where we provide education, connection, empowerment, and inspiration to future cannabis leaders.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ebele?
Hi, everybody. My name is Ebele Ifedigbo. I'm one of the co-founders and co-directors of the Hood Incubator. And pretty much how I got into that work, I'm also a 2016 graduate of the Yale School of Management of this school. So I pretty much leapt right in, both while I was in business school and then immediately thereafter right into the cannabis industry and founding this organization that I'm working on now. And essentially what we do at the Hood Incubator is working to provide opportunities for Black and brown communities in particular to participate and be involved in the industry in whichever ways we see fit. Just coming from the general notion that Black and brown communities have taken on the vast majority of the risk of marijuana prohibition. And now that the industry is legalizing, it's only right that we should be able to have access to the rewards and benefits that come with legalization and the growth of the industry. So we're working to help folks become investors, entrepreneurs, employees, just making sure they're protected and secured as consumers and patients, or even just advocates. If you come from a community that's been devastated by the war on drugs, you might not necessarily want to jump in and start working on a weed business, but you might want to make sure that the tax revenues from this industry are going to benefit, local parks or the education system or whatever resources your community didn't have, in large part because of the war on drugs, making sure that, our communities now have access to that. So yeah, we launched the Hood Incubator in January of 2017 with our programs, but prior to that, we're doing a lot of work just like, formulating the model, building the relationships that we need. But yeah, we've been operating for a little more than a year now.
Ebele, is it like a startup incubator where you have cannabis entrepreneurs come in and you're teaching them to be successful entrepreneurs?
Yeah, so that's part of what we do. So overall, we want to create a whole ecosystem of different ways for people to tap in, but our business accelerator is a big part of that. So within that program, we're looking to either help folks who have already been in the underground industry. They have, customers, they have distribution, they're bringing in revenue, but they're basically doing it illegally or at least in the gray market. We want to help them, get compliant, get their permits, and legitimize their businesses so they can continue to hold on to those economic assets and opportunities that they've been building. And then also working with folks who haven't been in the industry before, but maybe have some skill set that they're working with, whether that's like a tech background, engineering, culinary, and helping to translate those skills into market opportunities within the cannabis industry. But we also have an apprenticeship program that we're working on. We also do community organizing, just helping to collectivize our voices as marginalized communities so that we can be affected on the policy level, and just making sure that people know that our needs and interests need to be centered as this industry is growing. So yeah, we do a plethora of different programs and initiatives, but our accelerator program is a big part of that.
Awesome, thank you. I know I was reading this bio here, and I seem to recall that you won some major entrepreneurship award recently, and I did not see this in your biography.
Yeah.
Which is,
yeah, we've got a few awards. So we're the first cannabis-focused organization to be awarded with the Echoing Green Social Entrepreneurship Fellowship. So that's a pretty prestigious venture fund, but particularly for early stage social entrepreneurs. So I was awarded with that fellowship last year, and it's just really helping us to galvanize our message, get access to resources, and get the right connections that we need. And then following up from that, I was named to the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. I'm a 2018 Forbes 30 Under 30 awardee. And I guess lastly, I'll say last year I was named to Entrepreneur Magazine's list of 2017 50 Most Daring Entrepreneurs for my work.
No doubt. You probably didn't know this, but I'm on the 5 billion under 5 billion list. True. It's very exclusive. Evan, can you tell us a little bit about what you're working on?
Sure. So a few different things. I'll try and keep them fairly brief. Founded and managing partner of Casa Verde Capital, which is a venture capital firm dedicated to the cannabis industry, focusing on ancillary business opportunities, early stage seed, Series A investments. Could talk about a lot of the different things that we do there. Also founded Flower Shop, which is a creative agency dedicated exclusively to the cannabis industry, focusing on brand development, marketing, and PR. And lastly is Elo, which is a professional services firm which provides accounting, tax, and various advisory consulting services to operators in the cannabis space.
What kind of investments are you making in the venture capital firm, and how much do you have under management?
So we invest early stage, so it's smaller check sizes than some of the later stage venture you would typically hear of the larger venture brands.
What kinds of sizes, Evan?
So between 500,000 to $1 million for a first check, and follow-on differs depending on the scale of that operation. And again, it's typically seed and Series A investments.
And what was your background before? Were you in venture capital before?
I don't know, it wasn't my background. Started out in finance marketing background, started out in consulting and regulatory compliance, operational risk, technology strategy at PricewaterhouseCoopers, focusing on the financial services industry, then focused in healthcare, then left consulting altogether, went into hospitality and entertainment and media, running a music production company for film and television. Moved out to Los Angeles, got back into consulting, focusing primarily on tech and also entertainment and media, and continued with the side entrepreneurial ventures, which is where Casa Verde and all the rest came out of. So it's a fairly diverse background.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Natalie, you're not really in the cannabis industry, are you? What are you doing on my panel?
I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director at MAPS, which is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. And we're basically a nonprofit pharmaceutical company, and our main focus is developing MDMA-assisted psychotherapy and cannabis into treatment for PTSD, FDA-approved treatment. So I guess I'm here to talk about our cannabis research and our struggles with that, because surprisingly, our cannabis research has been much harder to conduct than our MDMA research. There's also been, psilocybin mushrooms, psychedelic mushroom studies in the U.S., easier to get approved. Our cannabis study to treat PTSD, we received a $2.15 million grant from Colorado State after legalization. So we even were receiving government funding for the study, but there are federal barriers in the way. So that's a lot of my work as policy director, is trying to keep the politics out of the way of the science.
And so do you work directly with scientists or institutions? How exactly do you get your job done on a daily basis?
Yeah, so we are mostly scientists actually at MAPS. I'm
You
the
are a
policy
scientist.
team. I am not. I'm a social worker by training, actually. And I have a background as a therapist, but we have a whole team of scientists and researchers that are developing the studies, and then we have sites around the US and around the world. So we work with therapists and scientists and those sites. But something I neglected to mention about our cannabis study that's quite unique is that it's in humans. Like a lot of the cannabis research we're talking about is in animals or not clinical studies. So that's pretty unique, and it's actually full plant smoked marijuana for PTSD. So
And
we're trying to get that covered by insurance. Full plant smoked marijuana. That is our goal.
and that is, the efficacy is good.
Sorry.
The efficacy on those studies is good.
So far, I mean, we just were able to start like in the last year because of all of these hurdles. And we're still just in phase 2, which we still need to do phase 3, which I can get into some of the barriers to the research later, but there's some issues with starting phase 3 thanks to our lovely Attorney General that we've mentioned a few times today. But yeah, I mean, so we haven't like published our research from our study yet because it's still in process.
Yep.
But a lot of the anecdotal research is quite strong from people with PTSD finding a lot of healing from cannabis.
Yeah. Now, listening to your backgrounds, I'm struck by how many of you are entrepreneurs, which I teach entrepreneurship. I love entrepreneurship. But the fact that some of you have 3 jobs really freaks me out. And I think, is there really a great opportunity in the cannabis industry? Because it seems like you're doing a lot of crazy stuff at the same time. Why are you such an entrepreneurial crowd?
I mean, I think the opportunity really, for me personally, when I started with privateer holdings, so I had kind of like one job, but then I created a startup within a startup, which is Marley Natural. And then that led to, I left those companies and was working as a consultant with a couple of companies, and then started working with venture-backed capital fund as a consultant. They brought me on, but I still was doing my other work. And then this MTech thing kind of came up 3 months ago, and we're like, yeah, let's do that too. And I think what's interesting about the industry is that everything moves so quickly, and a lot of it, there aren't these like very distinct verticals where it's like, oh, you're just a marketing person or you're just a finance person. There's a lot of overlap, and entrepreneurs kind of have to be a little bit of everything, and you see a lot of that in this space. And I think it's also just exciting. So it's like, yeah, I'll do that too. Why not? Until someday I'll want to sleep, and we'll get there, right? And I think that it's also the excitement around you don't want to miss the opportunities. Like if they're there, we have to take advantage of them. A lot of them will fall away. That's kind of been I think my mentality, and a lot of people I work with, and I'm sure a lot of people here probably feel that way.
I don't know how the rest of you feel.
Yeah.
You're all doing 4 things.
I'd agree. I mean, as I met a student earlier. She said, "Oh, I think this industry is interesting. I'd love, to perhaps work 8 to 10 hours." And they're the person that she was standing next to, and I just kind of laughed. We're like, "Yeah, no, this is not it. There's a lot of hours, and there's a lot of commitment here." But I think most of us love what we do. And so I don't feel like I'm missing sleep, quite honestly. I mean, when it hits me, of course, I'm going to hit hard. But when I revive, I'm back at it. I focus more on Women Grow and GVM Communications. I feel like they align. And there are other organizations that I work with or may collaborate with. But I don't think it's any different than what I did in my corporate life. And when I look at it and I think about the clubs and organizations and committees that you're on, if I'm running here and there in the corporate space, why am I not doing that in an entrepreneurial space? I feel like it's an easy segue and transition into it.
Huh. Give me a sense of where your careers go from here. I mean, as a nascent industry, there can't be many people with gray hair whom you're watching to see retire and you wish to ascend into their role, right? There's no one more advanced than you, I assume, in your organizations. They're relatively young organizations, it sounds like. So how do you think about your careers? And do you think about it within the cannabis industry, or you think about it in a broader space? What is the next
For
step?
me, I feel like the sky's the limit. And I feel like that's part of what's behind doing 2 and 3 and 4 things. Like, it's this opportunity we're all helping to actually shape this industry. Like, it's still like a Play-Doh type of thing. Like, what is it gonna be? And so it's just exciting to be able to get your hands into different areas and see, okay, how is this gonna work? How does this fit with the other part of this? And we're kind of like building as we go along. So you can't really have just too narrow of a focus if you're, trying to help build something new. So I think that's part of what's behind really just trying to get involved in as many different ways as we have the capacity for it and see where it leads to. But I know for me personally, I don't know where my career is gonna go. I'm more oriented toward, I see this issue that's critically important to me and that I'm passionate about, which is the racial inequity and the economic opportunity in this industry, just sort of like the convergence of those two issues. I feel passionately about it, and I have a vision for where this industry can be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. So that's really what's guiding me, is more like this vision of what I want to see as an outcome, where all communities have the opportunity to tap in and build prosperous communities and families from this industry. How that's exactly going to shape out or where I'll be 5 or 10 years from now, I have no clue at all. But
Do you think you'll be in the industry?
I think so. The magnitude of this issue, I think it's going to be at least a 10-year type of issue, if not longer than that. So yeah, I feel that I'm in this for the long haul. But within that, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but I'm just leading with, my commitment and my sense of purpose and where I want to go.
Yeah, and I kind of want to echo that idea of, not ignoring our long-term plans, but to kind of being present and seeing how things come. Certainly if I were making a 5-10-year plan in college or grad school, I was not going to end up at a psychedelic research organization. So that really came from my path of following different things and being present with the change that was happening around me. So yeah, that's my
Now, did any among you know for some time that you wanted to be in the industry? Or do you feel it is more serendipitous?
A bit more about that than my quite industry background. I would say I did. I was always interested in issues around mass incarceration, racial justice, social justice, and that was kind of what ultimately led to this work. But I definitely personally didn't know specifically about the drug war until a bit later.
Yeah, for me, I came to SOM. I have a finance background in private sector, worked with hedge funds and Ernst & Young prior to, and I came here knowing I wanted something different. I wanted to be more on the entrepreneurial side. I wanted something that had a social purpose. I had kind of this list of 10 things that I hoped a job had, and was like, if I get 2 or 3 of them, I think I'll be happy. And it was actually exactly 4 years ago today that I was presented with the opportunity to talk to Privateer Holdings. And it kind of threw me for a loop, but I was like, this is really interesting. I could not have a job in 6 months, or this could be the most interesting thing I ever do. And I was a little bit, I had also, the timing was really interesting because it was the first time in my life, right at that same time, that I had, my grandfather had just passed away February 15th, the day before, from cancer. And that was the first time in my life that I had somebody who was so close to me suffer from cancer. It was a 6-month battle. It was pretty brutal. And when you have anybody close to you, I think, and for anybody in this room who's had somebody close to them who's battling cancer, you come across cannabis pretty quickly. And for someone like me, it's like, well, how do we get him access to it? And I knew how to get it in the black market, much to my parents' dismay. But I was like, well, we can't, I don't know what's in it. You can't give it to someone who's suffering. And so that really piqued my interest, but I didn't know that there was a whole industry that was starting to bubble up around it. And this was still pretty early days with Privateer. So it was kind of a leap of faith. I talked to a lot of people at SOM. I'm like, should I take this job or not? Or, is this kind of lighting my fancy degree on fire almost immediately as soon as I walk out of here? And overwhelmingly, my mentors and professors here were like, this, who cares if you don't have a job in 6 months or a year? You're going to have the most interesting stories to tell, and you're going to do.
Which faculty said that?
Rodrigo, Amy Rosneski. So, I did kind of fear, there was a lot of stigma around it, like, am I kind of shooting myself in the foot? But at the same time, I thought it was so fascinating, and there were so many different issues that I was really passionate about that kind of were tied up in the industry. And so I went for it, and 4 years later, I think this is kind of my career, so
Now,
it worked out.
Is there any risk there, though, that, let's say, someone graduates with a fancy degree from a fancy school, if they leave the cannabis industry, will they be able to get that job at McKinsey, Goldman, those kinds of places afterwards with experience in the cannabis industry? Or what does it mean? What does it communicate? Is it negative? Is it positive?
I think there's still opportunity to get a job. Like, at the end of the day, this is a startup industry. You're still using the same skills that you would use in the skills that I've learned from my corporate background, working in finance or even working in more traditional nonprofits. I bring those skill sets to bear every single day in the work that I'm doing now. So it's like the transferable skills. Just because I'm focused on this particular industry, that doesn't mean that I can't switch my mind and focus on something if I wanted to. I don't think I want to work at McKinsey or something like that. No shade to McKinsey, but this is it's such an interesting space to be in. But I think a corporation would be silly to turn away a talent just because of the industry that we've been in. Because all of us here are built like we are doing entrepreneurial work. There's a certain grit and skill set and resilience and just competency that you build through this industry of all other industries, the way that it's fast moving, the risk that's involved, just how you have to be very strategic and forward thinking in order to succeed in this industry. That will make you, an asset to any other corporation that's trying to navigate a marketplace. That's my opinion on it.
Well, I think the reality is too, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
All of these companies now, I definitely did not think that any of them would be interested. And I actually used McKinsey and Goldman as the example. I'm like, they will never hire me. And maybe that's okay. But I know for a fact that companies like that now are all looking at cannabis.
Absolutely.
They're not, they may not be public about it, but that is how much the industry has changed, where everybody's just waiting for federal legalization and everybody's watching what's going on. And I think that it's a very different environment than even 2 years ago. So I think the door is open. Sorry.
No, it's okay. That's a perfect segue. I know for a fact they are. I am an alumni of Goldman. I was very quiet in entering into this space and saying that I formerly worked at Goldman, which I was there for 15 years. And I thought, they're going to look down on this. Well, there happened to have been an article that had come out, I think it was HuffPost, and I actually got a message back. Someone from the executive office, because that's the division in which I worked, said, "Why didn't you mention us?" And I thought, you want to be mentioned? And they're like, well, can you add us? And I'm thinking, well, first of all, I can. I can go back and tell the journalists, oh, you forgot to mention, and they can do an update. But why? That's more the question. Why? Well, what I realized, because I get alumni news, is that one or two of the co-founders, I believe, of Columbia Care are also alumni of Goldman. I think one of Evan's colleagues is former, and so every time I get this alumni news, I'm like, oh, I know how this works. I understand. They're looking and watching to see who's out there. They love identifying us. And they also want to stay in touch because they're also getting educated themselves because, as you said, once it becomes federally regulated, and I've seen other companies, they're looking for the experts in that space to give them whatever knowledge or education they need to shoot ahead, to speed ahead.
I have one. Sorry, Evan, you want to chime in there?
Add, a lot of these comments might just be U.S.-centric, but they're certainly hiring internationally. So you go to Canada, Deloitte has a very dedicated advisory practice. A lot of the banks do. There are plenty of the premier employers that are out there that are employing talent in the industry, just maybe not in the U.S. right now. So maybe everything's behind the scenes here, but these whatever skill and experience you learn from the industry is not only transferable in the U.S. when it becomes federally legal here, but it's transferable to any other opportunity around the world where there is a legalized program. So, I think if you're at a school such as Yale or any other prestigious school, you're not just focusing on what the U.S. is looking to do. You're more global in how you think about things. So I would take that conversation and say, well, yeah, Goldman in New York may not hire you, but maybe a division in Canada would, or if you're over in Germany, they would, and not be so narrowly focused. And a lot of people that I've come up with and worked with in the industry and from before, I mean, that's how they're looking at it. It's more of, have I assessed my own personal risk in making this decision to leave a very nice corporate position or role and go into an entirely nascent industry that has the stigma that it has? Where does that position me? What's my brand impact and what's my brand risk? And at some point, you got to weigh that risk reward. And I would say most partners at Goldman would be happy to see that. You're taking that risk, you're willing to put yourself out there as an entrepreneur or as a professional. That's something they look for.
They admire that,
They
actually.
admire that. So you might have a professional veneer of how you look and how buttoned up you are, but they want to see that appetite. And so I think that is ultimately a positive for anyone that makes that calculated decision and goes for it.
I'd like to know one final thing before I ask the audience for their questions. What is your feeling about the potential for this industry to be a diverse and inclusive industry relative to the other kinds of professional opportunities you had in other industries upon graduation from your various degree programs? Are you optimistic about it?
Cautiously so.
I talk about D&I quite often. I've been quoted saying that I hope in a few years we're not talking about it, and that it naturally just happens. Again, we talk about Wall Street. Diversity and inclusion didn't include there. I mean, didn't exist there, quite honestly. When I worked at Goldman, I was in the media relations department. I actually covered diversity for the company. And I was contacted a few years later only to learn that another competing bank wanted to create a diversity and inclusion press officer role. And I thought, oh, wow, that's interesting. They said, oh, we didn't know. Goldman actually focused on that, right? And I'm like, yeah, we made a conscious effort to identify, not just recycle the same 3 Black and Latinas in the industry, but really open up the doors and show that there are many talented people. And it's not just people of color. We're looking at the veterans. We're looking at LGBTQ community, but being more conscious about it. And there's nothing wrong with being intentionally diverse. So you're saying, hey, we want to hear from a diverse, not just diverse faces. You want to hear from diverse voices. You want to hear from diverse backgrounds. That's what's going to change this. If we keep creating the same cycle, then what's different? I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Other thoughts?
I mean, my only thought is, this panel is why I would say I'm hopeful. I think we've seen many in this industry that it's primarily myself and many others exactly like me. And this should be the representation that we have for quite some time and to be intentional about that. So I'm hopeful that, even here, whether it's intentional or not, you've created a fairly diverse, if you want to call it that, panel of perspectives and experiences, not just culturally or racially. And I think that's really important too. And really to Gia's point, it's more effort to make sure that in 5-10 years we don't have to talk about it. Now's the time to do it. And there are enough people with strong enough voices that are actively and aggressively raising their voice to make sure that it is focused on in this industry in particular.
And I want to echo that. This is my first cannabis business conference that was not predominantly white men on panels, every panel. So I think the organizers did a really amazing job of that.
And I would just add too, I would say that I am optimistic. Like, I can't really be pessimistic and keep doing the work that I'm doing every day. So I'm optimistic, and I'm really excited about this opportunity that the cannabis industry in particular has to do something different. Like, this is a historic moment where we can actually change the rules of engagement of how American industry works. Like, this is an industry that's still forming, like I said, it's still in this sort of like Play-Doh formative stage. So there's an opportunity, whereas in the past, other industries, formed in the usual status quo way, the people with the most money or the people who have the right racial profile or socioeconomic profile get in first, and basically, whatever scraps are left over, then we start thinking about diversity. Oh, how do we add a few extra Black people and women into the mix now that everything's already cooked up? The marijuana industry actually has the opportunity to do that work in the beginning, actually be centering the communities that have been most harmed, the communities that have been historically left out. And how is that going to shape the future of not only how this industry operates, but other industries will be taking note, whether it's existing industry, Wall Street, finance, or new industries that we haven't even thought of yet. I don't know, some space exploration or something, like new industries. They're gonna look and say, okay, what standards of best practices do we have here, and how are we gonna, either replicate the goodness or just keep, going with the same status quo that leads to inequity. So I'm really optimistic about the opportunity. The key is just how quickly can we act, how much can we work together, and how much can we align in our value systems and actions to actually make sure that this isn't just a bunch of talk and then nothing actually happens, that it's actually manifested in the way that we all want to see it go.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to ask the audience for questions. And do we have a microphone? There's some microphones. Great. And do you mind distributing as the need be? Now, to have an effective question for our panel, your first sentence when you speak should be a question. You should not have a second sentence. It's just for the most effective question. So please raise your hand and someone will find you with a microphone.
My hands are freezing. I don't know why.
Hey, thanks for doing this. And question for kind of each of you, what's your average day like?
Ooh.
No such thing.
Like really, no such
Yeah,
thing.
I think it's interesting because, several of us work on a variety of things that every day really, and I mean, I know it's like cliche to say it, but like every day can actually be very, very different. I'm assuming all of us probably have, 7-day work weeks that can fluctuate on when they start and when they end. I work East Coast and West Coast hours. So yeah, it really depends on the day. MTech is a focus right now, but other days Hypur Ventures is, and kind of anything in between. So I'm assuming you guys are similar.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually mentor a young woman in South Africa. And once they started talking about DAGA going legal, and I remember thinking, she's like, oh, well, we need to talk about this. I need to set up a conference call. And I'm thinking, geez, the hours, the time difference. But I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to do it. I'm willing to get up at 4 a.m. and have a conversation with her, because I know once my day gets started, I'm not going to have time. And then she goes into her late hours. I seriously love what I do, and I do believe that everything that I've done prior to even financial services was the entertainment industry. I've always worked long hours. It's in my DNA. It's what I do. I'm hardworking. So I felt like, much like the others here, we're built for this. You're ready for this. And if you want to see a change, you got to be committed to the time and effort that it's going to take in order to do that. So yeah, my hours, it's what it is until I pass out.
Yeah, and similarly, no real average day. I guess my average day is constantly working to expand the impact and expand the scale of what we're able to do with our organization. But it's a range of things. One day I might be, teaching our startups in our accelerator program, really using a lot of what I learned at SOM, but like literally in the workshop, going through the lean canvas model with them, grilling them on whatever their business model is and does it make sense or not. The next day I might be sitting down at a round table with Senator Holly Mitchell in Sacramento, in the state capital of California, talking about what does an equitable cannabis industry actually mean, and interacting with other stakeholders in that forum. Another day I might be at home working on a grant application, just in my pajamas, just typing up whatever. Another day I might be going out and meeting with our members, going to do site visits, seeing how their businesses are going, or just fielding people's questions. They're at step 1 in the process and they just need to understand like what is going on with this industry. So I guess that's just or meeting with my board, whatever. So those are some of the things that might happen, but day to day, there's no telling what tomorrow I might be doing.
Can I just say, we have to check a lot of boxes, I feel like, throughout our day. And it's not the same box every day or weekly, or at least, right?
But I would say that's one of my favorite parts personally of my work, that it is so varied. Like, I'm at the UN or in DC lobbying, and then I go to Burning Man, where we met most of our biggest donors, So I was just at the Crypto Psychedelic Summit in Tulum, meeting some other donors. So this space, there's just so much going on in so many different directions.
Your schedule is a little
Please,
different.
with the microphone here. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were asking questions. You're dispensing the microphone. Please give someone that microphone.
This is probably mostly for Ebele. I was wondering, because you talked about this idea of bringing people who've already been in the industry for a long time, bringing them over to the legal side of the industry, which is really cool. And do you see areas of the industry that are maybe more suited for people who actually have that industry experience versus areas that are ripe for MBAs or people from the outside to come in and take new positions?
I think it depends. It depends if I'm talking about people who are already in the underground, they have a variety of skill sets, whether that's through cultivation or just knowing the distribution landscape and how that works. I guess with the folks in the underground, and this is broad brushstrokes because it doesn't apply to everybody, but I think some of that more, like in our accelerator, we found that especially the folks who are already operating a business, like when we started talking about like balance sheets or financial models or something like that, they're kind of like, what are you talking about? But then once we actually start getting into the meat of like, what is a balance sheet? It's telling you like, how much assets do you have? How much do you owe people? What's your, then they're like, oh yeah, I know how to do that. Or income statements. It's just they haven't done it in this, business formulaic way. So a lot of it is just how are we helping folks to augment what they already know and get it and translate it into the language of what they need to actually go and, to be legal and be under compliance. So I think that's one area where folks like you and me who do have these business degrees and are more versed in like the formalities of business can actually come in and help augment and supplement the skill sets that people who are, have that more plant specific or, industry specific knowledge. And that is part of what we try to do with our accelerator program. I mentioned that we work with folks from the underground in addition to new people. So part of it is like, how can they link up and get together and complement each other's skill set to actually build a stronger business. And we have seen that happen where people came into our accelerator, 2 different business ideas on different tracks, but then they meet each other and they realize that they can actually do more together than either of them thought, in their initial business idea. So I think it's just like, how do you come in and see the opportunity, see the gaps and see where you can fit in and like help supplement the things that people are already working on.
We have just a few minutes, and then you'll have an opportunity, I think, to ask some of the panelists questions at the reception out here.
Drinks.
And where there's drinks, and which is an important component of socialization. But I would also appreciate your questions here. Please keep your questions brief so we can get through a few, and answers brief too, and we'll try and get through 3 real quickly. Yes, please, here. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Here. Go ahead. Yep.
Really fast.
Yep.
I'm brand new to all of this. What is your best piece of advice for me to get started to be where you are today?
What do you do currently?
I'm currently going to school for liberal arts and mass communications. I'm a facilitator for groups of CBT, and I'm also a consultant on the side. I help people with whatever problems they have. They all come to me, and I help them direct to where they're going. But at this point, I want to give more and give back to my community. I've lived here for 26 years in New Haven, and I finally woke up. And so I've been, following cannabis. I've been following the movement, and I want to be a part of it. I don't want to be left behind. So what do I do to get started, and how do I invest into all of this where you guys are today?
Any of us can answer that, and I don't want to monopolize it, so.
I mean, I would just say that network. I mean, I think coming to a conference like this, getting affiliated with groups, fine. I mean, there are a lot, right? Women Grow, there are all these different organizations, reaching out to people that you've met. Networking is a big part of this industry. I mean, any industry, but this one in particular, because I think it sounds like, and for a lot of people, like you're not totally sure what you want to do yet. Talking to people makes such a big difference, learning their experiences, and I would probably guess that all of us kind of got to where we are because of that. And so I would just keep doing that.
Yeah, that was the only plan I had to get into the industry. I'm just about to go meet as many people as I can and see how I can get in where I fit in. It took me a few months, but eventually I found my spot and I was able to jump off from there. But it was all just relentlessly trying to make as many relationships as I could.
Excellent. Please, over here.
Yeah, once again, thank you so much for coming. And it is a little bit of a similar question, but discreetly different. You mentioned that a lot of the skills or the things in this sector happen behind the scenes, and a lot of the skills that you bring from finance or nonprofits are very applicable. But are there resources online or clearinghouses that really can help individuals identify opportunities in this space, or is it all through networking?
Well, there's staffing companies. There's now executive search firms. I said a few years ago that I believe recruiting is going to be a big deal in this space. And even to your point, because they are very similar, I took what I was currently doing and had been doing for a collective of 25 years, and I brought it into the cannabis industry. And I got my first 3 clients at a Women Grow meeting. And then I was like, oh, I'm in the cannabis industry, right? But then it grew from there, right? And then you just continue to build up. But I also met people at staffing companies and said, what do they need? What are they looking for? So I think that, and there's a number of them in this industry. So
there's THE Staffing,
Thanks.
Viridian Staffing Group. Those are the 2 that pop to my mind, but yeah.
Google has all the answers. Just Google. It's Google.
And reach out to the companies that you like too. Like people might not make postings, but people are always looking.
Yeah, and actually LinkedIn too. People
Yep.
post
Oh my
on there a
God.
lot. Companies are much more open about using these platforms now. They weren't before, and I mean it's night and day. So you can literally Google everything now. So.
Wait, can I just say something? Because that's absolutely right. Today I got 2 inbox messages in my LinkedIn account asking for specific roles if I've come across or meet people. So LinkedIn is another great space.
Nice. Thank you. Last question here, please.
Thank you. It's been a great conference. But I'd like to ask the panel, beyond hosting a really great conference, what role do you see a school such as Yale School of Management or the other business schools or colleges playing in this industry going forward?
I would say what you do best is educate. Educate students, educate policymakers, educate really just the community around you guys, and that's what's the most important aspect. You can train as much as you want, you can give people skills, but I think the most important thing is creating a level set playing field for everyone and helping them understand what's important for the industry, what's important for themselves individually, what's important for society. And I think we're all doing this for the same reasons, which is the plant needs a place and we need to help them give voice, and I think Yale and other schools can do that.
And I think universities can play a role in the academia and research side of things. Like, particularly, we've been working with a couple of different universities, actually Yale being one. Well, I was talking to my professor about how we could use one of the class projects that she's, gives to the students to actually help our organization, the Hood Incubator. One of the things that we're working on is like developing workforce development frameworks that can be applied on the state level and national level. But how can we use the research and academia resources of universities to help us start doing that, laying the groundwork for what are the best models, what are the best practices, what are the best frameworks that can be, expanded and scaled around the country. So I think using that power, and then also we've been talking to Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. They're a medical university, but they just launched a center called the Lambert Center for the Study of Medical Marijuana or something like that. But they're working to actually do peer review research to help sort of legitimize the efficacy of marijuana as a healing medicine, and how can we start elevating that so that doctors in medical schools can actually be trained on the endocannabinoid system and knowing how to direct their patients on how to actually use the plant more effectively. A lot of it is like anecdotal research right now, not as strongly peer-reviewed as some, institutions or legislators might want to see it. But I think universities can play a huge role in helping to push that forward to help legitimize and expand the industry even more.
I think a big thing is that educational institutions allow for creativity and open dialogue, and there are a lot of people who, this is a safe space, right? Like, I don't think I would have gone into the industry if I didn't feel like I had the freedom to kind of just explore something I was curious about. And you don't always get to do that when you get out into the work world, right? You have all these kinds of barriers around you, and I think educational institutions have that amazing power to have this open dialogue. I mean, there are a lot of people against cannabis. We should understand why. You should be able to have those conversations. We shouldn't discourage them. And I think that that's something, whatever form that is, conference, classes, lectures, whatever. I think that's what educational institutions have the power to do that is unique amongst them.
Plus,
And
this
I
is the
do
next
think schools
generation
like
coming.
Yale possess unique ability to help destigmatize these issues, which is something I've really found. And I know before when you were mentioning, like, is this setting my Yale degree on fire? I honestly had the kind of opposite thing where I think my Yale degree was what made me partially brave enough to jump into this work. Well, one factor, and it really, people even talking about this Yale Cannabis conference, people are like, oh wow, like Yale's having a cannabis conference. Like that really, for better or for worse, does really impact what people perceive things.
There are more universities and more, and not just universities, but colleges that are becoming more interested. Students, it's sexy. It's a sexy topic. The more that the media continues to talk about it, more students are interested. I have more college students coming to me and asking, what should I major in? And I'm like, well, what do you want to do? What do you currently major in? They're like, oh, sociology. I'm like, do it all and bring it here because it's needed. And in September, we actually had a cannabis panel at Howard University. And it was standing room only in the science building. And the students were shocked. They're like, oh, we can actually focus on biology? Yeah, you can. Education is so key. And the generation here, those are the ones that are coming in that are going to take these companies up to the next level.
I would just add, look at what some of the programs are doing around the country, and I think the interdisciplinary studies are really supportive. So what UCLA is doing, and Dr. Jeff Chen is leading that, and Dr. P. Ebele at UCI, I think these are really all important aspects, and one school can't really address that. So if you can break down the bureaucratic barriers to how most university structures run, there's a lot of power in that. And so, yes, a School of Management or Business should be focused on it, but so should the School of Medicine and the School of Law. And as you start to bring those together, it becomes much more powerful. So I think that's a great point of incubating good ideas and good processes and practices for us to bring into the real world.
Okay. I want to thank you all for being here this afternoon. I hope you had a fantastic time.